Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time, as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today I want to do something completely different. I want to rank every Zelda game because Zelda is my very favorite series, and I thought I'd kind of break up some of my review content and give you some more lists and rankings and stuff like that. And I thought the best place to start would be with the Zelda series, since it is so near and dear to my heart. And I have played every single mainline Zelda game, and so I'll be ranking every single one. So this excludes things like the Zelda CDI games, the Hyrule Warriors games, little mini game things like Link's Crossbow Adventure on the Wii. Stuff like that I will not be including. I will also be excluding the multiplayer ones, including Triforce Heroes and the Four Swords Adventure and all the Four Swords variants. If I had to rank those two, I would put Triforce Heroes at the very bottom and Four Swords right after it, so they would be at the bottom of my list anyway. I just didn't ever finish either of them because they are either mandatory multiplayer or pretty much mandatory multiplayer. Triforce Heroes I tried beating by myself, but it's a slog, and it's really designed to be played with other people. So I will be excluding all of those. I'll be just jumping into the mainline entries. Let's start off with number 17, which is going to be Link's Adventure, or Zelda 2 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. I finally played through this one, I think most recently. It's either this one or Skyward Sword that I finally beat. That I've been working on for a long time. This one I finally got a hold of because of the Zelda Game & Watch. I was really interested in Link's Adventure. I'd heard a lot of good things and a lot of bad things about it. I thought it looked like one of the most unique entries in the entire series, and I was correct. This is a side-scroller RPG, very different from the original Zelda that was on the Nintendo Entertainment System. So this was a big departure. It was something new and unique. It has side-scrolling gameplay, but also has an overworld similar to the Dragon the Dragon Quest games on the Nintendo or the Final Fantasy. It's a very interesting game, but it is brutally difficult. Now, the first 3/4, maybe even 80% of the game, you can relatively get through just going from place to place. You'll probably need a guide every now and again because it's not super clear where you need to go, but for the most part, you can kind of figure it out. But when you get to the very last act of the game, the last couple spots, you have a gauntlet you have to face to get to the final dungeon, and one of the biggest things that hurts this game is when you die, you start all over at the very beginning. You keep your stuff. I don't know if that's specifically a Game & Watch thing. If it is, the continue feature is absolutely 100% necessary, and quick saves, of course, really help because this game can be really super punishing and brutal. But if you get through the final gauntlet and get to the final dungeon, you'll actually respawn there after you die because they knew that this was a place that you would need a lot of chances to get through. The final dungeon is ridiculously difficult. I didn't fully level up Link. You just level up by getting experience, which boosts your health, your defense, your magic, stuff like that. And if you don't fully level up, you don't really stand a chance for the final bosses that you fight. You have this dragon thing, I don't even know if it's a dragon, if it's some kind of bird serpent thing that shoots fire. It's ridiculously difficult, and if you're not fully leveled up, you will have an almost impossible time. That's what I had happen to me. I was several levels away from getting fully leveled up, so I just grinded for experience, and took me probably a couple hours of grinding. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe it was closer to an hour, but it was a long time. So this game is brutally difficult. I did finally beat it. It was incredibly rewarding to beat, but it's one of those games that I'm never going to touch ever again, except for just to boot up to have a little bit of fun, because it is such a brutally challenging game. And because because it's so different from any of the other Zelda games, it doesn't have the same kind of structure, it's one that you don't feel like you need to go back and play over again. I did enjoy it. I plan on ranking it pretty soon, but it's definitely at the bottom of the list for Zelda games for me. Next is going to be the Minish Cap. Now, this is my least favorite of the mobile games, but I really enjoyed it at the same time. This one came out right after Wind Waker and is in the same style, and it's really wacky. You have this cap that talks to you. It's this bird thing that guides you through the world. Think Cappy from Mario Odyssey if you're at a loss here. Way early on, I remember seeing marketing material for this game and really wanting to play it, but I never got the money to buy it for some reason. I just never got Minish Cap originally. I bought it on secondhand online and played it just a few years ago and had a really enjoyable time. It's super fun. The shrinking mechanic and going into these smaller areas and getting to experience these small worlds is really cool. I like it a lot. There is a fair amount of tedium in terms of like the side quests, the mini games that you can do. I remember there's a whole like collectible set that is really tedious and not very fun. But the overall story, I remember having a pretty enjoyable time. It's pretty lighthearted. It's nothing crazy. I like the more depth in Zelda storylines, in the lore especially. This one doesn't really have that. It's very much a more fun experience. And it's been a little bit since I've played it, so I'd like to go back through and play it again. I did enjoy it, but it definitely is the weakest of the entries for me, at least. Next on my list is going to be Skyward Sword. I originally had this one much higher because I really enjoyed Skyward Sword HD on the Switch. And I played the original on the Wii. I got the Golden Wii Remote edition. I really love this game. It's really fun. It has a lot of like some of the most important lore in the series. This is canonically the first game in like the timeline. And it has a lot of really fantastic things. I think Demise is the coolest encounter that you have with Ganondorf, essentially. This is before he becomes Ganondorf proper, but I think there's a lot to love about Skyward Sword. There's also a lot to not love. I think the stamina system is really rudimentary in this game. It feels like you're running and then stopping and then running and stopping. It feels like they definitely refined it in later entries in like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Skyward Sword definitely walked so that those games could run and even sprint. This was the stepping stones for these open world fantastic games. And there's a lot of great elements here. Some of the stuff that really doesn't work for me is flying around. I really don't like flying on the birds. I think the Skyloft area is kind of boring. I don't think it's super great with checkpointing, waypointing, anything like that. I just found myself trying to slog through this game more. The more you put into this game, the more it starts to give back and the more fun it is. So I would recommend if you stopped playing Skyward Sword at some point because you thought it was a little boring, if you can push through, it actually gets more enjoyable and the latter half of the game is much more fun, and I found myself driven to complete it at that point. So it is a great game. It's just held back by so many of these tedious things. That's the problem. I don't like tedium in Zelda games. It really could do without. But there's a lot to love about this game. A lot of great items, a lot of great dungeon design, and again, the lore is fantastic. So Skyward Sword sits comfortably down here for me. Next is going to be the original Legend of Zelda. This is another one I completed on the Zelda Game & Watch. I really, really enjoyed this game. In fact, I remember playing it and it was really difficult. I needed a guide for several things because some of the dungeons and everything are kind of archaic, like in the way that you have to go about entering them, like bombing some random thing in this overworld that you find. Some of the things don't make a whole lot of sense. It was to pad out the runtime, so you're playing this for a long time trying to figure out how to beat this game. But the dungeon design is spot on. They really nailed it on the head on their first try. This is classic Zelda, and this is what set the formula for the rest of the franchise. I really loved what this game was about. I loved the challenge it presented. It was difficult, but not too difficult. And without a guide, you might take a long time to beat this game, but with a guide, you just need to get to the dungeons themselves, and then you can do it all by yourself. The dungeons are not too confusing or anything like that. They're very well designed and easy for you to understand. I really enjoyed the original Zelda. Next is going to be Twilight Princess on the Wii. Now, I never quite finished this game when I first got it on the Wii. And it's crazy because I put a ton of time into it. I really enjoyed it. But I remember just stopping at some point and never going back to it. But I finally did go back and finish it, and it is a spectacular experience. This is the first T-rated Zelda game in the series, and I think it was a really great kind of like branch off into the same direction that Majora's Mask did. I love the more mature elements. I love the theming around it. I love how everything is very dark and grim. It's very much a product of the era too. This is the time where like every video game was really dull palettes, very gray and brown. You've got the Call of Duties, Gears of War kind of games, and Zelda kind of ventured that way as well. More realism in the graphics. Definitely not like a realistic game by any stretch, but more so in the Zelda series for sure. I really like what they did with this game. I love the unique items. It has some of the most varied items in the entire franchise. The dungeons are really exciting. For a 3D Zelda game, I think they really nailed a lot of the dungeon design that can get lost in the in translation. Like with Ocarina of Time, you've got the water temple that kind of sucked. You have like several dungeons in a lot of these Zelda games that you can always point to and be like, I didn't like that one. But this one had a lot of really fun dungeon design across the board. And the wacky, weird items, you have like the spinning top for a gimmick that's part of a boss fight, part of exploring the dungeon. I think it's brilliant, and I love what they do. The ball and chain cracks me up every time because when you pull it out, it's all of a sudden weighing you down. You can chuck it, but then you put it in your pocket and you can run normally. It just cracks me up. I love this game. It's a lot of fun. I like this one to go and revisit. I think they really ought to port this one and Wind Waker to the Switch. I don't know why they haven't at this point. I'm hoping that later on this year they'll port those over before the Switch 2 launches next year, presumably, but we'll see. I'd like a chance to replay this one without having to bust out my Wii U. So next is going to be the Oracle of Ages. Now, I played through Oracle of Ages and Seasons back to back. I really enjoyed both of them. They were really fantastic. I'll just say the next one in my list is going to be Oracle of Seasons. Now, it's a bit of a cop-out to put them right next to each other, but they are comparable in their quality. They're both really fantastic entries in the Zelda series. I enjoyed Seasons slightly less than Ages, or Ages slightly less than Seasons. I thought the jumping back and forth in time mechanic was a little bit less exciting than the Seasons one. The Seasons one is really weird and wacky. You have to go between 4 different seasons to unlock new paths and areas and quests and everything to progress in the game, whereas Ages you're going forward and back in time, which is a tried and true mechanic in the Zelda franchise for sure, but I just enjoyed Seasons a little bit better. They have really fantastic tight game design. I think the Game Boy Color era of Zelda games was really fantastic in terms of how well it controlled. It's the smoothest you have in like the Zelda series up to that point. Everything feels really nice. Being able to equip an item that makes you jump, and jumping in like diagonal instead of just going straight up and down, left and right, going diagonals is really cool. I like what these games do. They're very unique in their storytelling as well. They have weird NPCs and like buddies that you can utilize. Now there's like a kangaroo that you can utilize in one of them. It's been a minute since I've played these ones as well, but I really enjoyed them. I remember getting them on the 3DS to play through them because they were on a good sale, and I had a really lot of fun with these. They're really well designed. They've got tight gameplay, great dungeons, of course, as is typical of the Zelda series, but of this era as well. I really enjoyed Seasons and Ages. So next, number 10 on my list is going to be the Phantom Hourglass for the Nintendo DS. I got this game day one, and I absolutely adored it. I was a little skeptical about what they were going to do with like the touchscreen and movement. I didn't like the idea of moving my character via touchscreen, but it worked extremely well. It made perfect sense to be directing Link with your stylus and then swinging. It just felt really intuitive, and I was impressed that Zelda was able to pull this off. Nintendo was able to pull this off for the Zelda franchise on the Nintendo DS. I was worried what they were going to do with the franchise going forward mobily, but it works out exactly right. It feels very much like a Wind Waker title, which I love. If you've seen my Wind Waker video, you'll know that I absolutely adore that game. It feels very much like that game, but in handheld form. You can customize your ship. You can unlock all sorts of different things for it, different like styles and things that upgrade it. I remember getting up to the gold ship was really cool and something I really wanted to do before I finished the game. The bosses are really fun. I think they're some of the most dynamic in the entire series. They're really very interesting and unique. I think the Phantom mechanic was something that was a beautiful thing that they added to the series. I liked what they did. I liked how this was their first foray into the multi-screen thing, and they really pulled it off in an exceptional way. I had a blast playing this game from start to finish. I don't think I put it down like a single time. I played that game from start to finish and didn't touch a single other game until I finished that one. I love Phantom Hourglass, and I want to go back and play through that one again. And my next one on the list, number 9, is going to be Spirit Tracks. I didn't think I would like this one nearly as much as Phantom Hourglass because I like the ship mechanic and going out and sailing on the ocean, again, like Wind Waker. And I thought having a train makes no sense. You're on a specific track. Like there's no variance. You can't just go out and explore. But was I wrong. Like they really outshined Phantom Hourglass in almost every way. Better dungeon design, better controls, the graphics are fantastic, the story is kind of weird and fun too. It like doubled down on the weirdness from Phantom Hourglass and delivered something that was even better than its predecessor. I think that's really fantastic. It is, again, happenstance that I happen to put these two right next to each other on the list, but they were just really fantastic entries, and I liked them so much, they both just had to be right here. Number 8 is going to be Link's Awakening. Now, I'll be honest, I played the original, I've played DX, I have played the remake on the Switch, and I really love this game. I think it's the best designed of the Game Boy Color era, Game Boy era originally, because this was originally just a black and white one, and then they made the color one for the DX version. That was when I played first, and it's a really fantastic game in every respect. It's the weirdest in the series because it takes place in this dream world. Zelda isn't even present. It's funny that this is called The Legend of Zelda at all because it's really just all about Link. You have Marin as the main female character in this game. Zelda is nowhere to be found because it takes place in a dream. And the whole goal is to make it to the end of this game and get off this island and get out of this dream world so that you can go back to Hyrule, go back to adventuring. You get shipwrecked at the beginning of the game. The opening cutscene is gorgeous, whether in the original or in the remake. I love what they did with this one. I think I like the original just a tad more because it does feel more like the style of the era. And I love how tight the controls are in that like very pixelated screen. I really loved playing through this one originally, but I love what they also did with the remake. That is a separate experience. While it adheres to everything that made the original so fantastic, I love the new art style. I love that they updated so many of the models. You have all the Mario enemies that look fantastic in 3D. I really love Link's Awakening. If I had to put them in order, it'd be the remake and then the original and then DX probably, if I had to rank them individually. Next on my list, number 7 is going to be Tears of the Kingdom. It's a game I finished, I think, most recently in the Zelda franchise period, because it is the most recent release. I loved Tears of the Kingdom. I'm excited to do a full review on that one. It is a very worthy successor to Breath of the Wild. I love that they did something completely different and didn't do any of the mechanics from Breath of the Wild, really, except for the glider. I love that they decided to go full ham and do something completely wild and wacky and weird. Building things in the game feels exceptionally fun. Utilizing the jumping through the ceiling mechanic was really cool. I really liked what they did with that. I love how much it departed from Breath of the Wild while still maintaining the DNA that made Breath of the Wild so fantastic. And I really love the story. I think it might be the best story told in Zelda because it's so dynamic and interesting, and you have Ganondorf as the main antagonist, and this is like really early days Ganondorf. I like what they did with it. The voice acting is superb. Tears of the Kingdom kept me busy for over 100 hours. I had a huge blast. It's one of those games that it was so massive. I usually like to uncover an entire map in a big open world game, but I gotta be honest, I only did the cloud area, the mainland, and I didn't even fully map the depths because it's so enormous. It essentially triples the size of the original map of Breath of the Wild by utilizing the depths and utilizing the sky. The sky not so much because it doesn't use the entire landmass. There's not things everywhere in the sky. But I really love what Tears of the Kingdom did. I like that they did something so drastically different and gave us such a fantastic story. This is one I'm definitely going to revisit later on. Next on my list, number 6, is going to be Ocarina of Time. This might be a surprise for some people because Ocarina of Time is often heralded as the best video game of all time, let alone the best Zelda game. I think it's usually a toss-up between this one and A Link to the Past for most people, if they're talking about the best Zelda games. Now Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom are definitely in that conversation as well. But for me, Ocarina of Time is really a perfect video game in almost every respect. If you're playing the 3DS version, then you have a better water temple, so you pretty much have the full package. But even with the dated water temple that's not the most fun to go through, Ocarina of Time represents Nintendo at its very best. This is a perfect game by all accounts. It's a beautiful epic tale. It has the best one of the best stories in all of gaming that's ever been told. The cutscenes are fantastic, especially for coming out in the Nintendo 64, kind of more early on in its life cycle as well. You have so much content in this game, so many fantastic dungeons. The ability to skip forward and back in time to adult and young Link is a really fantastic mechanic. I love everything about Ocarina of Time. There's so many side quests to complete. The main story is superb. I can't say enough good things about this game, which goes to show how much more highly I think of these other games that are above it if I'm talking this highly about Ocarina of Time. Number 5 is going to be A Link Between Worlds for the Nintendo 3DS. I love A Link to the Past. If you've seen my favorite video games of all time, A Link to the Past is my favorite video game of all time. So obviously, spoilers for this list. So I was really looking forward to A Link Between Worlds when it got announced. An actual sequel to A Link to the Past, my favorite video game. I couldn't have been more excited and a little bit nervous. I was worried what they were going to do mechanically. I was worried about if they were going to utilize the 3D feature because I didn't love that on the 3DS. That was going to be like part of the gimmick. But man, did they blow my expectations out of the water. Not only did they create the most dynamic top-down Zelda game ever with fantastic dungeon design, some of the best in the entire franchise, right up there next to A Link to the Past. They also added the mechanic of becoming a mural on the wall and utilizing that to get around places. They really pulled out all the stops for this. It is an incredibly worthy sequel. It's the best video game on the Nintendo 3DS, in my opinion, and it is absolutely out of this world fantastic. I can't say enough about this game. Number 4 is going to be Majora's Mask. I actually like Majora's Mask a little bit better than Ocarina of Time for the sole reason that it is a more mature and dark story that they're telling. This was Zelda's first real foray into kind of that nightmarish world that the Zelda could occupy. And the fact that they decided to explore it in a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time was a bold risk. I love the mechanics, what they did with this game. Instead of having the jumping back and forward in time for the young Link and adult Link, now you have a 3-day cycle and you've got to stop the moon from crashing into the land, and you've got to stop Skull Kid. You have to do everything in your power to keep everything at bay. And all the while, you initially get turned into a Deku Scrub, and you have to just utilize that for the first bit of your playthrough. You are only him and not regular Link. You can't utilize your sword. You have to utilize bubbles. It's just wild and weird. It's very it's almost horrific when they put on the masks, when Link puts on the masks or when takes them off, the way he changes. It's pretty scary. And the images and the themes that they implement in this game, it's kind of a scary game. Even going back and playing it now, it's quite alarming that this is like an E-rated game. Again, the 3DS version is probably the best place to play it. It gets rid of some of the more arduous things in the game, makes it a little more streamlined. But either place that you're going to play it, this game is out of this world good. And it's better than Ocarina of Time for me because it has so much more dynamic gameplay. You get to play as a Deku Scrub, you get to play as a Goron, a Zoro, and you have a plethora of these other masks that affect how the gameplay goes. And I just think it's so dynamic and so interesting, and the world is so fresh and new. It's just a phenomenal experience. I love Majora's Mask. I love every time I boot it up. If I start a new file, I'm so excited to do the entire sequence at the beginning. Even though it takes a while, I just really love what they did to set up this game. I think it's so unique, and it deserves a spot on my list. Number 3 is going to be Breath of the Wild. Now, I debated whether I wanted to have Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild higher on my list when I was finishing up that game, and I was concerned. I'm like, man, is Tears of the Kingdom better? But I think for me, when I got my Switch day one, I got Breath of the Wild, nothing can compare to that experience that I had. Doing those first few dungeons and then opening up the world with the glider and gliding into this massive experience that Nintendo had curated. I think they really outdid themselves. This is still, for me, the best open world video game of all time. They did something truly unique and special with this, and it's amazing that they were able to make such a fantastic experience for a day one game on a console. I have to applaud Nintendo for pulling out all the stops for this one. The mechanics are really interesting. The stasis, the timer bomb, everything about mechanically this game just really works. You see the DNA from Skyward Sword in this. You have the glider mechanic. You have the little sheet that you pull, and that lets you glide down in certain spots so you don't take fall damage. Now all of a sudden it's a fully fledged mechanic where you can actually glide around this big luscious open world. You have tons of shrines to discover. You have all sorts of weapons to find, and you've got the Sheikah slate and take pictures of everything. I think that Breath of the Wild is just so much pure fun from start to finish. Everything about this game is what a Nintendo game should be. It's just fun to play. There's nothing but fun to be had in Breath of the Wild. Whether you just go for the main storyline or you do every single side quest and every shrine, excluding maybe the Korok seeds because I think they're a little annoying. That's the only thing I didn't fully complete in this game. you're going to have a really marvelous time, a really beautiful experience, likely a transformative experience for a video game. Breath of the Wild is a really special game for me. It's definitely my favorite open world game of all time. Number 2 on my list is going to be Wind Waker. I've talked about this on the channel. Feel free to go check out that video. I go into depth about this game and why I love it so much. I recently recompleted it. Wind Waker is just really special. It's my favorite 3D Zelda game. I think the dungeon design is perfect. I love the sailing mechanic. I love the characters in this game. I love that Zelda isn't even known at the beginning of the game, that you don't even know who she is or where she is. I love that Hyrule is underwater and that it's a big mystery about why we don't have Hyrule in this world and why we just have a bunch of ocean and random islands. I love that Link is probably the youngest in this game that he's ever been. If not the youngest in this one, he's close to the youngest. I love that he's just a kid. He's not even like part of the Hero of Time's lineage or anything. He's not anyone special, but because of his courage and bravery and because he wants to do everything he can to rescue his sister that's abducted by Ganondorf, he becomes worthy of that moniker of the Hero of Time, becomes the Hero of Wind instead. He holds the Triforce of Courage because of his bravery. I just love this story. I think it's really poignant and wonderful. I loved revisiting it. The gameplay is so much fun. I love the art style. The cel-shaded art style just works today, and I love that it was so heavily criticized initially when it first was revealed, but now it's like ages like fine wine. It's so beautiful to play. The items are so unique. I think this was the first instance of having like the gliding mechanic that is now present in Breath of the Wild with the Deku Leaf, being able to utilize that to glide across for not super long, but essentially the stamina system, but from way back when. I just love everything that they did in Wind Waker to set up success for the future 3D Zelda games. Wind Waker, I think, is the perfect Zelda experience in 3D, and I love everything about it from start to finish. I love that no matter how many times I play it, I still find new things that I haven't discovered in previous playthroughs, because it's a huge game. There's tons of random side quests and like little interactions you can have with NPCs that you wouldn't know unless you're just going out of your way to find them. I love this game so much. And my number 1 is going to be A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo. No surprise, I just did a list on my top 10 games of all time, and this was my number 1. I love A Link to the Past. It's a perfect video game in every respect for me. The dungeon design is the best in the entire series. Mechanically, this game runs perfectly. I love the overworld. I love how huge this game is for a Super Nintendo title. And then having the Dark World as an entirely separate world on top of that doubles the size of the game. Mechanically, this game just runs flawlessly. There's so many items. It's so unique and varied. Tells such a beautiful story. You have Ganon in his like pig form, probably the most intimidating version of Ganon that I can think of. I love how you can... I just love everything about this game. I'm going to go through and replay it very soon so I can get like a full in-depth analysis, and I can do a big long video on why it's my favorite game of all time and why nothing has been able to surpass it for so many years. This was my favorite game on the Game Boy Advance. This was the first time I played it, and I've played it so many times since. Again, this is just a perfect video game from start to finish, and the best Zelda has to offer in every single way. So let me know in the comments what you think about my list. If you have differences, if you have your favorite Zelda game, let me know what your favorite Zelda game is and why. I would love to hear about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.